Adeo is the prototypical entrepreneur, a rule breaker, a shit disturber. And he's been an entrepreneur his whole life, and entrepreneurs make something out of nothing. And he's done a lot of impressive things. He's founded 8 companies, 4 of which have been acquired, 3 of which are still operating. He'll tell you that he's made a lot of money for a lot of other people. That's the story, and that's why he started the Founder Institute. He's also on the board of the X Prize Foundation for the last 12 years. This is the organization that gives out tens of millions of dollars for people to put rockets on the moon, or into space at least. So he knows a little bit about all sorts of startups. So Adeo runs the Founder Institute. In 4.5 short years, they're now on 6 continents and 55 cities and have graduated over 1,000 startups. This is the world's largest entrepreneur education program. So please give Adeo a warm hand of applause and welcome him to the stage.
You know, I never followed a band before. If anyone's a little drunk, I have some seating right here. Please come up. You can breathe in my ear, you know, say uncomfortable things. I'd love to have you. That doesn't happen very often, does it? Where someone drunk just comes on stage and sits down. I almost wanted to follow him. So let me tell you a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. So I live in Silicon Valley, but I travel the world. As I was introduced by Vitaly, we have chapters in 60 cities, 35 countries, and Silicon Valley is a mindset, not a place. So I'm going to give you 5 realities about Silicon Valley and some dirty little secrets. Then I'm going to give you 4 myths, 4 things that you think are true but are not, okay? I'm going to talk about 3 strategies that you can use to make your company, your city, your country more like Silicon Valley. And then I'm going to wind it up with some awesome data porn. I'm going to give you data like you've never seen it before. I had designers work on it. It's super awesome. So hopefully by the time I get to the data porn, we'll have it filled out from the people upstairs. So let's kick it off right away with the realities, right? No one's drunk, wants to come up? So first reality is most people in the world look at the economy, their business, their market as a zero-sum game. What that basically means, when a new competitor enters the market, they take resources away from the other players in the market. The reality in Silicon Valley is they have a very different view. They believe that every time, and we believe that every time a new company enters a market, what you may perceive as a competitor, it actually grows the overall market. We do not believe that markets are finite. We believe that each additional company that enters makes the pie bigger. Now, maybe this is blind optimism, and it might and well be, but again, there's no winners, there's no losers. In Silicon Valley, every competitor, every new company makes the pie bigger, and that's a pretty big difference from the way the rest of the world looks at things. Secondly, related to that, in Silicon Valley, as a result of that belief, people collaborate, right? So in the rest of the world, we had 2 companies on stage right before who are competitors. right? Now, they're slightly different business models, but I doubt they go to coffee, go to lunch. I doubt they get together every Friday and chat about their business, right? Well, that happens in Silicon Valley. So I'll go out with leaders of other incubators. So Dave McClure is speaking tomorrow night, 500 startups. It's, a competing incubator, and we're friends, right? We sit down and we chat probably once or twice a month. And whenever I have a big news item, he says, thank you, that's awesome, congratulations. And whenever he has a big news item, I tweet it out and thank him. So the idea that even though we would appear to be in competitive spaces, we realize that it's not a zero-sum game. So each time one gets a victory, it helps everyone. The rising tide floats all boats. So, as a joke, I put co-opetition wins. Of course, there really are no winners and losers. Everyone's a winner, and no one's a loser. So another interesting reality about Silicon Valley, which is also rare in the rest of the world, is that it's a very egalitarian place. And there's this concept of a flat equity structure, so that an employee or a manager or a leader may actually not have that great of a disparity between the equity ownership of themselves and, let's say, some of the even junior employees. So it's also not uncommon in Silicon Valley for the CEO to be the least paid person in the senior staff and sometimes in the entire company. In a startup, the CEO is definitely the least paid person in the company. As the company grows, you'll usually have engineers and other key people who are paid more than the CEO. And the equity is similar. The CEO might have a little bit more equity, but the next top engineer isn't that far behind. And as you go through and raise money, your company capitalization table, the ownership of your company, may look like the chart behind me here, where you'll have advisors with 1 or 2 percentage points, maybe an incubator. You'll have some angels in there, Series A, Series B, Series C investors. And you'll see that the difference between employees and management, they're almost equal, right? So this concept of flat equity structures is something that should penetrate the rest of the world. Now, what's also interesting is that people go into building businesses in Silicon Valley with the end in mind, right? So they set their company up from day one to succeed. So, for example, when you set up a Delaware C Corp with a top law firm in Silicon Valley, they will give enough shares so that when you go public, the ownership will work out well. So they're thinking, okay, what is the price per share when you go public, as they set up a company with no employees. So they're actually thinking 10 or 15 years down the line with how they set you up right away. And that's an unusual thing. I mean, I doubt that happens, and I know this, it doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, partially because a lot of the law firms don't have that experience of having taken companies public or seeing so much success, so they don't even know how to do it. Now, there's some other things. We also have a concept called founder vesting. So about 2/3 of founding teams will get in some sort of fight and break up. You know, within 2 years, this normally happens. Now, if you have founder vesting in place, it solves all of the battles that will happen when this split up event occurs. Essentially, what founder vesting says is you earn a little bit of equity for each day that you work in the company. So if we fight and you leave, you only get equity up to the point for which you stayed, and then the rest is gone. So let's say you own 25% of the company, and you vest over 4 years, and you leave halfway through, 2 years, you would get 12.5%. And this solves so many problems. There, another big trend, which is unpopular in Ukraine and Russia, is that in Silicon Valley, the founders have almost complete control over the company. So there's a lot of like, you'll read about it in TechCrunch and other blogs. Oh, you know, Mark Pincus or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon, they own so much of the company, they have so much control. But those are the biggest companies on earth, and they deserve the control. And so basically people have realized, ooh, we should let founders have control of the company because they do a pretty good job building them very large. And again, that's not popular in other places. So the fifth, and probably something most of you know, is that there's a huge sense of giving back, right? So every time Mark Zuckerberg takes a company public or Twitter goes public, billions of dollars goes in the hands of engineers and designers and secretaries. And guess what they do? They buy a nice car. So if you go to the Facebook parking lot, it's like ridiculous. It's like, you know, Ferrari, you know, Audi, BMW. So they buy a nice car, and then what do they do next? They invest in startups. And what do the leaders do? They go and mentor startups. So you're essentially recycling the knowledge and the wealth created right back into the ecosystem. So essentially, as an entrepreneur, you arrive in Silicon Valley, you have your shitty idea, amen to that, there are millions of them. You start sharing your ownership out, you get some help and some capital, right? And then boom, when you grow and sell, you go recycle it back, you take the money that you've made and you pump it into new startups, you take the experience that you've gained and you help mentor new companies. And yes, there's some equity relationships that go on, but it's not necessarily done for the money, it's done to help the ecosystem, right? Which is an important point. Now, dirty little secret is Silicon Valley is not some wonderful, beauty. There was a shot of it a moment ago. It's expensive. So I don't know if you can see that very clearly. It's a shack. Literally, it's a shack that cost $1.1 million. All right? There was a house not far from mine. I was like, man, this is the dingiest, shittiest house I've ever seen. It sold for $1.5 million. I was like, who the hell bought that? Are they crazy? Like, move somewhere else. So it's super expensive, and it's hard to live. In addition, I'm sure you all have some vision who haven't been there that there's like skyscrapers and like Google and like Yahoo signs. There's no there. It's a highway called the 101, and you don't even see buildings with names on them very often because most of the interesting companies have campuses sort of off the 101, so there's no there. Just lending to the fact, again, it's more of a mindset than it is a place. So here are some of the myths, right? The big myth is, hey man, I'm gonna make Ukraine like Silicon Valley or Singapore like Silicon Valley. I'm gonna get tons of VC money. And then when tons of VC money is in Ukraine or Singapore or Berlin, it would be like just like Silicon Valley. Well, let me help you. VC money, right? There are lots of VCs here. I've met a bunch of them. What do they need to make an investment? Well, they need good companies, right? So you can put all the VC money in the world in a place. If there aren't good companies, they're not going to make investments. Then those companies need to go hire talented people. So you can fund a company, but if they can't get any employees, whatever, right? They can't grow. They also need an environment where they can do partnerships and deals, and then they need to sell, right? So if no one's buying, if they can't go public, you know, the VCs don't get a return, so the whole model doesn't work. So you can't just pump VC money into a market and be like, it's going to be like Silicon Valley. We got 9 VCs. You need a lot more. You need an ecosystem. Another big myth is that the clicker works. It's a myth. No. Another big myth is that, hey, I'm going to build a university and I'm going to teach entrepreneurship. Okay, you can't teach entrepreneurship. Let me tell you what entrepreneurship, the best training that you can have for entrepreneurship is fucking boxing against, it's like you have, what's that ultimate fighting boxing where you're like a wimp and you just get beaten on. That's the best training you can have because entrepreneurship isn't a skill. It's about passion with idea and talent, right? You can't train that, right? You need to be passionate about what you're doing to the point where some big Russian dude like that guy who escorted our drunk friend to another planet is pounding on you, and you get back up and you're like, I'm ready to do it again. And then, you know, you sit down over here all bloody and he comes back. Hopefully that doesn't happen. No bloody people, only drunk people. But anyway, you can't teach entrepreneurship. You need the passion, and passion can't be taught. Now, I know Skolkovo is a sponsor, so I knew that when I made this slide. And that's a picture of Skolkovo. You can't build a facility and it's like, this is Silicon Valley. You know, the greatest companies on earth were started in garages. Apple, Google. And the Google garage pictured there, I don't know how clearly you can see it, is like, as is the Apple garage, these are shitholes. There's like a ladder, a skateboard hanging. In Google, there's like, God only knows what they were storing in that garage. These are the single greatest technology companies started in recent memory. And they, again, and Microsoft too, and very humble. They had no fancy office with receptionists and frappuccinos. Like, you know, you would have to like take the oil from the car and like put it on a Benson burner and maybe make a frappuccino if you were in Steve Jobs' garage. So you can't, facilities don't really create these Silicon Valley. And then there's this other thing that, okay, I have an idea. I'm going to send my best entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley so it rubs off. It's like pixie dust in like the Disney movies. Like I sprinkle the pixie dust and then I fly away. That's actually a photo of the Plug and Play Tech Center with the flags. A cube is a cube is a cube. If you take a Dane and a Swede and a whatever Ukrainian dude and you put them in a cube in Silicon Valley or you put them in a cube in Skolkovo, they're still in a fucking cube. It's not like the pixie dust is going to rub off on them. And then when you go take your picture in front of the Facebook finger, that's not going to give you the magic of Mark Zuckerberg. You know, again, Silicon Valley isn't a place, it's a mindset. And yeah, I can't tell you how many delegations of famous like presidents and ministers come by our shitty little office in Silicon Valley, and they're like, tell me the secret. I'm like, you know, welcome. I don't know, what secret? They're like, rub the fairy dust on me. I'm like, I have coffee. You want some coffee? So you can't, it doesn't rub off, right? So these are all just myths. Dispel it. And here's another problem. If you go to Silicon Valley, you might as well just stay. Don't come back. I'm teasing a little bit. So again, it's a mindset, not a place. So I'm going to give you 3 strategies to think about. So, you know, number 1, Silicon Valley is about talent. The essence of Silicon Valley is about talent. Now, for what most of you don't know, and I'll tell you right now, is the Founder Institute does aggressive personality testing, which I'll talk about in a moment. it turns out the best talent isn't even in Silicon Valley. It's in Tel Aviv. And number 2 is Denver. So, you know, and Tel Aviv is actually pretty good, and Denver is too. So talent matters a lot. And Silicon Valley isn't necessarily in the top talent pool. And these are some other metrics I'll get into in a moment. But as you can see, in all of these different characteristics of people that we gain through testing thousands of entrepreneurs, you don't see Silicon Valley in the top 5 in any of them, right? There you go. So additionally, training, and we did 3 T's, which is kind of cheesy with a T, or cheesy with a C. So we did talent, training, and teamwork. So talent is, again, the raw material. Training is more like that recycling of knowledge and capital. So if you have experienced entrepreneurs in your market, it's important that they give back, that they mentor, that they invest their money, that they spend time with the next generation of founders, that they help them grow their businesses and help the ecosystem grow. Without recycling the knowledge and wealth, you will never get to another point. And here's a big one, stopping the brain drain. So this is a sad truth. You know where the greatest global mentors are of the Founder Institute? So we have 2,500 mentors worldwide. Most of them, the greatest mentors, are in Silicon Valley. Many of them started in Paris or in Berlin or in blank Vietnam. And over the 3.5 to 4 years that we've been running the Founder Institute, the top 5% of the local mentors have all emigrated to Silicon Valley, right? Well, that's fucked, right? These are your greatest startup minds who are like leaving your country to go somewhere else, which means that you have no one left at the very top of the pyramid to teach the next generation. So, you know, I don't know if there's an easy answer to this one. I'm not proposing a solution. But I can tell you something, that if that continues to happen, it's going to be very hard for local ecosystems in Ukraine, Russia, Eastern Europe, Europe, or anywhere else in the world to get off the ground. I mean, I'll give you another interesting tidbit. So some of my wealthiest friends are native-born South Africans, right? Elon Musk, Kimball Musk, Lyndon Reeve, founder of Solar City. They all were born and grew up in South Africa. They ain't in South Africa anymore, and they're billionaires. Imagine if they stayed in South Africa, how much better that country would be with that type of brain trust present, right? So it's important in training not only to recycle the knowledge, but to keep these leaders present in the market. The third T, teamwork. So my team made these slides. I guess a bunch of ants holding up a domino is representative teamwork. Certainly, maybe it is. So here, this is the concept that you need the whole ecosystem working together to make great startups, right? If a startup has to fight in the world alone, their chances are very bad, right? Because it's so hard to create a company. Now, it shouldn't be too easy. I think like in the case of Singapore, for example, the government has made it so easy to do certain things that it almost gives entrepreneurs this false impression, oh, this is going to be easy, right? I can incorporate, oh, I just got 50 grand for showing up. Hi, I started a company, 50 grand, thank you. Wow. And then all of a sudden they have to hire people. Ooh, that's hard. And then they have to do all these other things that are suddenly hard, yet that starting point was super easy. Can I get a water? Maybe, oh, can I get an alcoholic beverage and a drunkard on stage? So it has to be hard, but you need the support of the ecosystem as well to make it a little bit easier. And without everyone pulling for these young companies, you're not going to get a Facebook, you're not going to get a Google, you're not going to get a big company in Kyiv, in Moscow, in any of the countries of this region. You need everyone pulling together. And quickly on that point, so one thing that happens in Silicon Valley that's very interesting is when a company starts to get momentum, there isn't this great sense of competition that we were talking about before. It's this great sense of collaboration. So Twitter went out and bought all these little things that were either using Twitter or competing with Twitter, and they rolled them up, and then everyone who was doing Twitter-like stuff went into the company. It's like as the momentum grows with this big company, in other markets, people are like, we need to fight harder to stay alive, whereas in Silicon Valley, the whole ecosystem rises up to help that company, to propel that company forward, to really take on the world and make a big difference. Which is why Google has, you know, thousands of the best people in the world working for them. So now I'm going to go into the data porn. I kind of went quickly through the other things to get to data porn because I like data porn. So we've tested about 15,000 entrepreneurs. And our tests basically do three things. We do essentially a hard-to-cheat Big Five personality test. And I can go into that in a little bit, and I will in a moment. We do a fluid intelligence test, various IQ tests, and things like that. And we also do a bunch of testing around what you might call personality disorders. So this is a back on screen over there is a puzzle that might appear in the test that you take. It's not actually one of our puzzles, but it's the same theory. So hopefully you all can solve it. And this is one way to test fluid intelligence, right? So I'll give you a hint. Seven, yeah. I was thinking, how can I give a hint? With it's like rhymes with Evan? Like, yes, it's number 7. Well done, sir. You're going to make for a great entrepreneur. So again, 15,000 people have taken the test approximately, a little over that. Over a couple thousand people have enrolled in the program. Over 1,000 companies have been created. And then what we do is we watch the companies meticulously and we go back to the personality test results and we try and correlate what questions they answered, what personal attributes they have, and figure out which predict. And we have. So age, ironically, even though it's not it's not in the test itself, we ask how old you are. It turns out the older you are is one of the attributes that makes you potentially a better entrepreneur. And we don't know exactly why, but we have a couple theories, right? Theory number 1 is that the older you are, the more life experience you gain. You have children, you buy a house, you have a job, so you can apply that life experience to your startup. The second theory is the older you are, the more knowledge you have around the world, about the world, so the business you create solves a real problem that exists in the world. Whereas I find that a lot of younger entrepreneurs sort of make problems up in their mind, and I'm like, have you ever spoken to someone in a media company? And they're like, no. I'm like, all right, well then why are you building something for media companies? So it turns out that age, older age is one of the predictors of entrepreneurial success. As the test indicated before, fluid intelligence is another one. Anyone know what fluid intelligence is? Wow. Anyone here awake? Okay, good. I'll tell you what fluid intelligence is. So, fluid intelligence is a measurement of your ability to rapidly learn and apply a rule set. So, for example, your CTO comes in and is like, our server's down. You're like, oh my God, our server's down. A minute later, your controller comes in. We just got a $100,000 check from blankety blank. You're like, great, lots of money. Next minute, your secretary comes in. I quit. Oh shit, my secretary's quitting. That's basically fluid intelligence in action. You know, your ability to rapidly learn and apply a rule set. And obviously, since that's pretty much the plight of an entrepreneur, constant, varied feedback that needs you to figure out solutions to in rapid succession, it turns out that fluid intelligence is a very good predictor of entrepreneurship success. Now, fluid intelligence is almost entirely genetic. You can't like play brain games and get better at fluid intelligence. And it declines with age. So thank God, as you get older, you get better because your fluid intelligence is going down. Like by the time you're really old, you're like, what'd you say? I don't remember. Like, so fluid intelligence is a good predictor. Openness is a big 5 personality trait, is also a very large predictor of entrepreneurial success. Like it sounds, openness is a measurement of how open-minded you are. So a more open-minded person sees the world the way it is, whereas a more closed-minded person sees the world the way they want to, right? So if I were closed-minded, I would be like, there is no revolution going on in Ukraine. Everything's cool. I just, you know, an open-minded person would be like, what the fuck am I doing on stage in a country that's having a revolution? Am I an idiot? Maybe. Like, well, okay, well, at least I'm here. So the more open-minded you are, the more you're able to see the world the way it is, the more you're able to spot problems, the more you're able to spot challenges, and that, as an entrepreneur, is a helpful attribute. So agreeableness, another big 5 personality trait. So if you're super agreeable, basically you're like blowing in the wind. You're like, oh yeah, man, that's great. Oh, you want to go hiking? Sure. Oh, wait a minute. He wants to go bike riding. And oh, you know, I want to take a drive in my car. And so you're the sort of lower on agreeableness that you become, the more stick-to-itiveness, the more hard-lined you become. Now, you don't want to be too hard-lined to the point where you're like, I'm going to march through that forest even though it's on fire, right? That's not good. So moderate agreeableness, sort of the ability to stick to it with a dose of reason, is also a good predictor. Now, last but not least, and my favorite, is there's a lot of, you know, excuse my French, fucking crazy people who think they're good entrepreneurs. Now, it turns out we measure a lot of crazy, and there's a lot of craziness in the world. I shouldn't say that. Let me take that all back. There are people who face personality challenges. The greater challenge you face as a human being, the less likely you will be to succeed as an entrepreneur. The reason for that, and we have a lot of empirical data on this one. In fact, if you are not flagged and your co-founder is flagged, 100% of the time in our data, you will break up. 100% of the time. Now, the personality problems or challenges or opportunities present themselves in an interesting way. And you've probably seen this in the workplace. The guy who flies off the handle, starts throwing shit. Like, what the fuck? You're fucking late. Right? That's a person who has a personality challenge. And what happens is they have very low thresholds, after which, when they hit those thresholds, they fall off a cliff. And it's interesting that the cliff is the same, regardless if you have one type of flag or another type of flag. You basically kind of go ballistic and become extremely self-destructive. So there are different triggers that cause you to go over the cliff, but once you hit that cliff, the cliff looks the same. And some of these are, there's predatory aggression. You probably know these people. They're like, they've killed you, you're dead, and they're still fucking pummeling you. It's not enough to beat you. They need to like continue beating you once you're dead. Their aggressiveness is beyond a level of sanity. There's obviously excuse making, and I forget what the term of in psychology is that we use for it, but basically these people are they can never be held accountable for anything. My favorite is the deceit. Now what's interesting, most of these are pretty awful, but deceit is a weird one. So deceit is like a permanent liar. Like basically you don't know if anything they're saying is true or not. Now, it may sound true and they could be totally compelling. For all you know, I'm totally with deceit, except I have data behind all this. But, you just never know with someone who has deceit. It turns out that there's actually a lot of successful entrepreneurs that have this flag. So we're like, I don't know. So this is the only flag that may not be all that bad to have. Obviously, emotional instability is another big one. Again, this is like you push someone a little bit. Usually this is an example. A little bit of stress will set these people off. A lot of artists have high emotional instability. So, oh my God, my painting didn't sell, off the cliff. And narcissism is another trait. So these bad traits tend to be problematic. I can talk about them for hours. So, but now I want to get into the data porn. So what we did for you people, is I've analyzed, we've tested people in Ukraine, in Moscow, all around the world, and I've analyzed the results for you. And so this is the first time ever this data will be shown. So, as you saw earlier, highest overall predictive scores. So what we do is we take everybody and we rate them, everyone who takes the test, and we rate them 1 to 5. 5 is good. Well, all right, more specifically, it's more like 0 to 4.2, because I don't think anyone's gotten above 4.2, and there's some people that have 0.65 or 0.4, and you're like, man, you should not be an entrepreneur. So call it 0 to 4.2, and the #1 place in the world in terms of the predictive nature of entrepreneurship is Tel Aviv, followed by Denver, Rome. Who the hell knows how Rome is up there, but they are. Sydney and Lisbon. In terms of the people, the founders with the highest degree of fluid intelligence, and we've tested hundreds of founders in each of these cities where we operate. Moscow's #1, followed by Singapore, Munich, Brussels, and of all places, Ho Chi Minh City. There you go. You got to throw in Ho Chi Minh City somewhere, otherwise known as Saigon. The most open-minded founders are in Los Angeles. That makes a lot of sense. All the actors and, acting is open-mindedness is also a cultural attribute. So if it were in LA, the world would be fucked, or media would suck, one or the other. Followed by New York, ironically, Johannesburg, Warsaw, and Sydney. And then the most moderately agreeable, Chicago, Jakarta, Perth, Madrid, and Rio. So most conscientious. Now, I didn't talk about conscientious before because it doesn't actually predict entrepreneurship. This was a shock for us. So when we first set out to do this testing, we took a guess. We said, all right, what do we think would produce entrepreneurs, right? Conscientiousness, right? What is conscientiousness? Conscientiousness is like, I show up to work on time, I get my shit done on time, I'm like clockwork, baby. Like, I roll out of bed, I deliver. That's a conscientious person. Turns out, doesn't fucking matter. We have completely, in fact, deceit is the inverse of conscientiousness. And as I just said before, we've noticed that highly deceitful people are doing really well as entrepreneurs. So basically, you don't roll out of bed, you stroll in late, you're like, no, I was on time, dude. I was there. I was in the kitchen making coffee for everyone. You can go check it out. Go to the kitchen right now. You'll see the coffee's there. Coffee's not fucking there. They're lying. They lie about everything. Turns out, you can lie about everything and be a great entrepreneur. But people in Bogota don't lie very much because they're the most conscientious entrepreneurs that we've tested, followed by Hanoi, Medellin, Ho Chi Minh City, and Lima. Ironic that the South Americans are dominating the leaderboard in conscientiousness. The most emotionally stable, Sydney, Washington, D.C., Perth, Helsinki, and Johannesburg, and then the most extroverted. Here's another interesting thing. Again, emotionally stable and extroversion doesn't really matter either. So these three metrics, you might think, right? Wow, wouldn't it make sense that someone who's extroverted would be a better entrepreneur? Well, no, because it doesn't show in the data. Wouldn't it make sense that someone who's like a rock solid, like like the ship's sinking, and they're like, the ship is sinking, all hold hands, we'll be brave, that they would make for good entrepreneurs? No, doesn't really matter either. So a lot of our assumptions going into the testing were wrong. So now let's look at Silicon Valley versus Europe in particular. It turns out that it's equal. In terms of the predictiveness of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs as compared to the average in Europe, it's the same. So we're on equal footing in terms of the Silicon Valley market versus the Europe market. Europe is doing better in fluid intelligence, so that's a good sign, but we're a little more open, a little more creative in Silicon Valley. But again, it goes back that it's not about a place. It's about the people. It's about the talent. And looking at the averages, it's all things said, it's basically equal. Now, again, we're equal in agreeableness. Europe is more conscientiousness, has higher conscientiousness by about 15%, but again, that doesn't really predict. Silicon Valley is a little more emotionally stable, and Europe is slightly more extroverted. Which is not that surprising, because if you go around Silicon Valley, there are not a lot of people like me. Evan Williams, one of the founders of Twitter, is one of the most reserved and humble guys you'll ever meet. Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, hates public speaking. He's had to make it, he rarely does keynotes. He prefers interviews, and if you've ever heard an Elon keynote, you'll understand why. It's basically like a rocket science data dump where you're like, whoa, I just got a physics lesson that I didn't want from a billionaire. So these are fairly, not that extroverted technical people. Now, we went into some additional detail for you, and we threw in Kyiv. So Tel Aviv, Berlin, and Moscow, because we know that, just to give you a sampling of the different markets, as you can see, fluid intelligence against Kyiv. So that bar is the average. If it's green, it's how much above the average a market is. If it's red, how much below the average the market is. So Moscow are not the friendliest people. To the Russians out there, you know, Nazrovia. Clearly, you know, it sounded like our Russian friend, you know, he's a classic example of low agreeableness. Not only did he wander on stage and sit down, but he didn't get up until security came, right? But he wasn't all that low in agreeableness, because when the large man came, his high conscientiousness kicked in and is like, holy shit, I'm going to get my ass beaten down. And he has pretty good fluid intelligence, so he's like, oh, need to leave. But he had his ass firmly planted there for a long period of time. Pretty much explains the scores on that right-hand bar to a T. So again, you know, I can go into all sorts of examples of what this means, but I'm looking at time and I want to take some questions. So here's what I will offer. If you want to know what your entrepreneurial DNA is, and you're smart, I'll let you take the test and we'll send you the results. Just for you here today, this offer won't last forever because it actually costs me money to do this. So, but for all of you lovely people, I'm happy to give it as a gift. And we'll tell you where you fare as compared to others. We'll even throw you in a category. And I want to leave you with the fact that, again, great companies start with great people. They're great people all around the world, as our data indicates. And this isn't, again, I don't have a low conscientiousness. I'm a data junkie. The data is clear. And I've offered a couple reporters here to share the data so that they can really get a sense of what we're talking about and maybe publish some. So we tried to keep all the information friendly. There's some things that, you know, are kind of controversial. At the end of the day, though, Silicon Valley isn't a place, it's a mindset. You all have great people in your different cities, in your different ecosystems. So I hope that to see Silicon Valley-like success stories in every city and every country in the region. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Adeo.
High five, man. I never got a standing ovation before.
Thank you, Adeo.
Cry. Questions. I left some time for questions. The acoustics in here blow. If you have a question, like super raise your hand and shout it out. Or come up, you can sit.
Maybe I can help some questions.
Tell Vitaly, our great host. By the way, while he does that, big round of applause. Let me just say before we do that, amen. There's a revolution going on. And he's like, the show must go on. So to Vitaly and the team.
Thanks. Thank you. Question is if you're going to share the presentation, the slide deck.
Yes.
Where?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I'll put it on SlideShare and tweet it out. Yeah?
No microphone.
Okay, I would like to ask about the methodology of this predictive score.
Yeah.
So you took the entrepreneurs and then you observed them, tested them over years and see which of them were successful and which of them were not successful?
Yeah, he's asking about the methodology. So we're actually using, so I'm going to give you the semi-abbreviated answer. So I had some slides about the methodology that I deleted because they're a little boring, and then it would have taken the full amount of time. So essentially what we did is, as I said, we tested about 15,000 people, and then we watch the people who've been through the Founder Institute very carefully. right? For about, for now, some of them going on 3.5 years. And some companies die. About 10% of the companies are dead. Some companies are kicking ass, and some are in the middle. And we essentially score them 1 to 5. Plus, during the program, mentors, peers, and directors also rate them 1 to 5. So we see 1 to 5 ratings during the program. We see 1 to 5 ratings after the program. Then we say, here are the 5s, here are the 4s, 3s, 2s, 1s. Go back to the testing data and constantly refine and examine the accuracy of the data. So about 86, we have an above an R.45 predictive nature of the test. So about 86% of the time, the test is dead on how someone will do, or under predicts. So they actually do better than the test says. Now, we've done things like control groups. What's the problem with a control group? Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of fucking problems with a control group. So we've done a control group, and we're like, wow, we'll randomly select people to be in the program. And that's like basically, putting a drunk man in charge of the Titanic in iceberg waters. If you let anyone in, you're letting the crazy people, the blankety-blank people, and every time we've done a control group, it's been a complete fiasco. So we've had to sort of adjust a pure scientific method for a business-minded approach. So I would say on a 1 to 10 basis, we were probably like an 8 or a 9, and now we're like a 6 on a scientific method to validate all this data. But if we move too far towards a 10, we start doing things that jeopardize the health of the business for the purity of science, but the science is to help the business, so why would we do that? Anyway, other questions? Sorry. That was a moderate answer.
Do you believe that we could recreate a mindset of Silicon Valley in our country or in our conditions, in our mind conditions? Could the one start the wave?
Do I believe you can? Yeah, I mean, look. So, yes, and not obviously, right? We operate in 60 cities around the world. I hope to be in 150 cities by the end of 2014. Well, we wouldn't do that if we didn't believe that you can create the same mindset everywhere in the world that is in Silicon Valley. And, we say globalizing Silicon Valley. Hopefully one day when Silicon Valley is globalized, we can change the tagline to something else and be like, making awesome companies everywhere in the world or something like that. There are challenges, right? There's a lot of challenges to face. And what I would say is the biggest crime right now, in my view, is that people in Silicon Valley think the rest of the world is not worth any attention at all. The Silicon Valley mindset is 100% myopic. When I go to famous people who are my friends, and I'm like, yeah, we're opening in Cape Town and Johannesburg and Ukraine and Moscow. They're like, what are you, fucking crazy? Are you all right, dude? Have you been drinking? Were you on stage and like moderately agreeable? I'm like, no, man, no, I think it's going to be awesome. They're like, I think you're a fucking idiot. So that's a shame, because if actually people in Silicon Valley believed that there were great opportunities in the rest of the world, it might make things a little easier. But I believe, man, and you should believe too. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Adele. Based on your experience, do you see any difference in mindset between the hardware and software entrepreneurs?
The what?
Hardware and software entrepreneurs.
Ooh, that's a good one. No, because we haven't looked. But we haven't, that's interesting. I don't know why we, sometimes stupidly obvious things in front of your face don't get done because you don't think of them. And that is an example, great suggestion. We should analyze the data by category of entrepreneur. What are hardware entrepreneurs? What are software? In fact, all of our graduates are categorized so we could suck all the data and quickly figure that out. So I don't know the difference. Maybe there are, maybe they're not. But we were surprised, by the way, how much difference there is in geography. In fact, I said I censored the data a little bit because, and we put like, you know, the sliders, because it's a big spread. Like when you saw a big green, that means it's like 20% above the average or more. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some big differences in the different types of entrepreneurs as well. Any other questions?
Hi. Yeah, I think I'll be the last one, or maybe not. So I work for the big, actual international company, but like 80% of our employees are based here in Ukraine.
Great.
And my question will be to like the first part of your presentation when you were talking about the people who arrive in Silicon Valley and hope to touch, I don't know, thumb up button near Facebook, you know, and to get inspired. So the thing is, when people are in Ukraine and they do not have any international experience, they cannot be open-minded. And you say it's really important, blah, blah, we understand that it is, but you know, how to then motivate them and how to open their eyes. Actually, we are used to send the best and the most promising employees to Silicon Valley, to Munich, Berlin, and other offices, you know. But what will you recommend in this case?
Well, okay, so
Thanks.
it turns out, thank you. It turns out, did everyone hear her question? Okay, it turns out that open-mindedness, so I'm going to give you sort of a funny answer and then a real answer. So it turns out that open-mindedness is also pretty genetic. But there is one way, and this is actually scientifically proven, to increase open-mindedness. Does anyone have an idea of what that is? Psychedelic drugs. So if you do psychedelic drugs, you will have greater openness. So no, flying someone to Silicon Valley, unless they do some shrooms, will not increase their openness. So that was a sort of funny answer. But it is also true, by the way. Openness is genetic. Now, by the way, I've just said that fluid intelligence is primarily genetic, and openness is primarily genetic. Uh-oh, what does that mean? Ding, ding, ding. Entrepreneurship proclivity is largely genetic, unless you do mushrooms. So the reality is, at least our data, and it's a pretty large sample set of testing, maybe one of the largest tests ever conducted in social science, certainly getting up there. And by the time we're done, when I'm dead or whatever, it will be the largest. Entrepreneurship is genetic, the traits for success. Now, back to your question about sending someone over to Silicon Valley. So you can't, I know what you meant, which was not openness, the personality, it's open to new ideas. You know, I would say that open to new ideas comes from the trait openness, and with the internet, with the tools that are available today, with conferences like this, there's no excuse for a Ukrainian entrepreneur not to read, not to go, not to experience things that open their mind, and they don't have to get on a plane and fly a long way, as I'm a little jet lagged, to do it, right? They can do it right here. So, you know, putting someone on a plane to Silicon Valley, I really don't think is the way to go. It's finding the right people and then helping them with, you know, training and teamwork, the 3 T's, finding the right talent, helping them with training and teamwork, and it can be local to do it that way. So do we have time for another question? One last?
One last.
All right, yes.
Hi, I've got a question. So what is the main idea of Silicon Valley behind making money?
Oh, the great irony is no one in Silicon Valley is about making money. So Steve Jobs lives in a smaller house than I do, as did Larry Page. And I don't live in a mansion, let's put it that way. So you have two of the wealthiest, by the way, and Steve Jobs and Larry Page live about 300 yards, well, when Steve Jobs was alive, lived about 300 yards away from each other, which goes to tell you how big their houses are, because 300 yards isn't that far, and it's across the street. So, you know, people don't do it for the money, right? In fact, maybe that should be, if that's the belief structure in the rest of the world, let me dispel that myth right away. No one does anything in Silicon Valley for money. Literally. In fact, it's sort of frowned upon to have gauche or ostentatious displays of wealth. You know, people live very modestly. A billionaire, you know, go billionaires. The richest people on the planet live in homes in suburbs that look middle class, except they cost like $15 million. Because that shack costs 1.1. So, you know, I think if you're asking about what the motive is, you know, people wake up every day with a belief that they can change the world, right? And that's why they do it, and that's why I do it, and I know that's why everyone that I know in Silicon Valley that's successful does it. They say, you know, look, I have a vision for the world that is a better place, and I'm going to work my darndest off to make sure that that vision is realized. And I think people here, I mean, listen, guys, you have that vision too. Look at what's happening. The reason the conference is empty is because people aren't at home watching TV. They're in a square 1 kilometer from here because they have a vision that the world can be a better place, right? And they're taking the action. So those visions exist everywhere. And today is a case in point. So with that said, I think that's a fitting ending note. Oh, no, one more? Okay. One more. Ah, shit. I can't do better than that. I'm screwed. One more. All right.
Yeah.
Such a good end.
First of all, thank you very much for your speech, and sorry that I'm such a big blow at the end. My question is, in your data, Tel Aviv comes first in average, but it doesn't present in any top 5. So does it mean that one should have balanced and pretty moderate in every characteristics rather than to be on top in 1 or 2 and be crap in the rest?
So let me, I sort of followed the question. You're saying like...
Yeah.
No. So the way the test works, the way our predictive scoring works is that if you have high fluid intelligence, it's more... So let me take a step back, and it's good that you asked this question because these are traits. So I'm really tall, but I'm not a good basketball player. But generally speaking, being tall is a trait that helps you be a good basketball player. Now, similarly, high fluid intelligence is a trait that helps you be a good entrepreneur, but there's a lot of great entrepreneurs with low fluid intelligence, right? There's a lot of entrepreneurs with, you know, low openness that are great. So you can overcome the traits that you have possibly by finding a co-founder, by, you know, minimizing your weaknesses and focusing on your strengths. So the predictive nature of these tests is just saying what is it's again a trait. Like, yeah, if you're gonna get do it in you know, basketball, you want a bunch of tall people on your team, right? So these traits are just saying, hey, here's a bunch of tall people, but you know, there's a bunch of small basketball players who are awesome too, right? So again, just to clarify. Now, yeah, so you want to have the awesome stuff in each category so that you enter the game ahead of the average with greater chances to make your life easier, because starting a company is so hard that you sort of want the deck stacked in your favor. And these personality traits, many of which are genetic, if you have them, the stresses, the problems, the fires, the drama will just be easier for you to deal with on your journey to build a great company. So, with that said, not as great as ending before. Thank you guys very much. It was lovely to chat with you guys.